These are the headlines that we're following at this hour. Russia vetoes the renewal of a United Nations watchdog on North Korea's violations of Security Council sanctions. This comes at a time when Pyongyang is accused of providing weapons to Moscow to use it in the war with Kyiv. The new high-speed train, the GTX-A line, will be up and running from tomorrow, which will cut commutes between Suseol in Seoul and Dongtan in the outskirts of the capital in half to just 20 minutes. South Korean Prime Minister Han Duck-soo holds a meeting with heads of the country's 5 major hospitals, urging them to bridge the government and the doctors in creating a negotiating body.
Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with Russia putting an end to the United Nations monitoring of its sanctions on North Korea. The Security Council members believe the Kremlin's bloc is aimed at shielding its own arms deal with the regime. Our foreign affairs correspondent Ji leads us off.
For the past 15 years, a panel of experts has been monitoring United Nations sanctions against North Korea over its nuclear program, reporting twice a year to the Security Council and recommending action for improved implementation of the measures. But Russia vetoed a 1-year extension of the panel during a vote on Thursday, bringing an end to its operation when its current mandate expires on April 30th. Of the 15 council members, China abstained from the vote, while the remaining 13 member states voted in favor. During the Security Council meeting, South Korea's ambassador to United Nations pointed out that Russia seems to be more interested in embracing North Korea for providing munitions and ballistic missiles for the Ukraine war, at the expense of the proper functioning of the Council.
This is almost comparable to destroying a CCTV to avoid being caught red-handed.
But Russia hit out at the experts, saying the group has ceased to carry out its obligations.
Its work is increasingly being reduced to playing into the hands of Western approaches, reprinting biased information and analyzing newspaper headlines and poor quality photos.
A spokesperson for South Korea's foreign ministry criticized Russia's move, saying it was an irresponsible action that greatly undermines the trust of the UN Security Council within the international community, at a time when monitoring UN sanctions against North Korea needs to be strengthened. Thursday's decision comes as Russia has recently been deepening military ties with North Korea. Officials from South Korea and the U.S. have said North Korea has provided munitions and military equipment to Russia for use in the war in Ukraine. The U.S. said it's deeply disappointed by Russia's latest actions, calling it an example of greater cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang.
Moscow appears to be intent on facilitating the DPRK's illegal pursuit of weapons of mass destruction, and its veto today was a self-interested effort to bury the panel's reporting on its own collusion with the DPRK to secure weapons that it can use to further its aggression against Ukraine.
With the monitoring of North Korea sanctions set to end next month, there are concerns that the Security Council could lose a reliable measure of informing UN member states of sanctions violations by North Korea. Ji, Arirang News.
Against this backdrop, fresh criticism has arisen about the efficacy of the UN Security Council. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
The shutdown of the panel monitoring the effectiveness of sanctions against Pyongyang by Russia using its veto power is leading to questions regarding the function of the UN Security Council. Experts in South Korea say they saw the panel's demise coming, given the recent heightened exchanges between Moscow and Pyongyang.
The decision has created a bigger loophole in imposing sanctions on North Korea. In addition, arms transfers between Russia and North Korea will become more active.
Professor Kim added Pyongyang would more actively pursue trade exchanges with Moscow, even as smuggling items from Russia into the north may increase. This isn't the first time that doubts have been cast on the efficacy of the UN. Even General Assembly President Denis Francis called for structural reform last November, saying the UN seems paralyzed while violence and war continue to spread across the world.
The reality is that even if a single permanent member opposes reform, it cannot be done. Polarization is intensifying with the escalating rivalry between the US and China and changes in the international order in a new Cold War.
Professor Kim said efforts can still be made by South Korea as a non-permanent member of the UNSC, noting the recently adopted resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. 10 non-permanent members, including South Korea, tabled the resolution. Professor Kim added as a non-permanent member, South Korea must do whatever it takes to prevent illegal arms transfers between Russia and North Korea.
And if taking a collective action at the UN becomes a challenge, the South Korean government can instead make joint efforts with countries like the US and Japan, as well as EU nations to create bilateral or minilateral solidarity to reinforce sanctions against North Korea.
Professor Kim added each of these countries can monitor North Korea's sanctions violations while stressing the importance of information sharing. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Now here in Korea, the GTX-A line starts partial operations tomorrow, connecting Suseol in Seoul and Dongtan in Gyeonggi-do Province. Today, at the opening ceremony, President Yoon emphasized what this means for the nation. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon has more.
From 80 minutes to just 20, Suseol in Seoul is now connected to Dongtan, Gyeonggi-do Province through the first Great Train Express line, GTX-A, as it starts operations on Saturday. President Yoon on Friday attended the opening ceremony at Suseol Station and said this is as historic for the country as opening the highway from Seoul to Busan back in 1970 and the nationwide express train line back in 2004.
오늘 2024년 3월 29일은 대한민국 대중교통, 대한민국 국민교통혁명의 날로 기록될 것입니다. 저도 지금 가슴이 벅찹니다. 이러한 기쁨을 여러분과 함께 나누고 싶습니다.
The line for now will stop only at Seongnam Station in between, but Gusong Station will open in June, which is the station for Yongin City. Yongin City and Dongtan make up a large portion of the nation's semiconductor industry cluster, and President Yoon said that this will allow the industry to attract more talent in the field as well as more investment. The line also is expected to relieve some housing issues by making the outskirts of Seoul a more viable option for commuting. The fare rate changes depending on the distance, but the cost of riding from Suseol to Dongtan will be 4,150 Korean won, or about $3. Using the K-Pass card, a public transportation discount program, it costs 2,000 to 3,000 Korean won, or about $2. This comes after 8 years since ground was broken, but it had already passed the budget feasibility test back in 2009, meaning the construction had been delayed. President Yoon, after the ceremony, took the train himself and got to Dongtan to meet local residents who will use the system.
감격스럽기도 하지만 이것을 빨리 우리 정부가 한 7, 8년 먼저 좀 서둘렀으면 할 수 있었는데 한 7년 이상 이것이 늦게 개통이 된 것이 여러분들께는 좀 송구합니다.
This is just the first of many GTX lines. GTX-A, once completed in 2028, will go from Dongtan through Seoul to Paju. GTX-B, once completed in 2030, will cut through Seoul horizontally from Incheon to Namyangju. GTX-C, to be completed in 2028, also cuts vertically from Yangju to Suwon. President Yoon has already pledged that the lines will be extended even further earlier in the year as well. In addition, President Yoon promised that similar express metro lines will open in other regions of the country as well. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Moving on to the standoff between the government and the doctors over the medical school admissions hike. South Korean Prime Minister Han Duck-soo holds a meeting with heads of the country's 5 major hospitals, urging them to bridge the government and the doctors in creating a negotiating body. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
Amid the mass resignation of trainee doctors and medical school professors to protest the government's decision to increase the student quota for medical schools, the Prime Minister met with hospital chiefs in an attempt to find a way out of the situation. On Friday, Prime Minister Han met with the directors of the country's biggest hospitals, commonly dubbed the Big Five, namely Seoul National University, Yonsei Severance and St. Mary's Hospitals, and Samsung and Seoul Asan Medical Centers. He asked the hospital chiefs to play a mediating role and convince doctors to return to their posts, saying that continued efforts from the government to communicate with them had been unsuccessful thus far. On the same day, measures to improve working conditions for doctors were also introduced. The Ministry of Health and Welfare followed up on recommendations from a Central Disaster Management Headquarters meeting, which advocated new measures for the pediatric care system, such as increasing payments to doctors performing high-risk neonatal surgery. Additionally, pediatricians can now apply for extra compensation for treating children up to 6 years old, which was previously only available for the treatment of premature babies and those up to the age of 1. The Health Ministry will also set aside an annual budget of 67 billion Korean won, or just under $50 million, for the effective treatment of newborn babies outside the capital region. This funding will go to 51 regional hospitals that deploy specialists to treat newborns in neighboring areas. However, medical school staff and trainee doctors are maintaining their strong stance, especially following the election of Im Hyun-taek as the new leader of the Korean Medical Association. Im is known to be one of the KMA's most vocal opponents of increasing the medical school quota. During his first press conference on Friday afternoon, he said that doctors would return to their respective workplaces when the time was right. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea's ambassador to Australia, Lee Jong-seop, has resigned amid growing controversy over his appointment less than a month ago. Lee has been criticized for allegedly fleeing to Australia while still under investigation for allegedly interfering in a military probe into the death of a Marine last year. Lee has denied any wrongdoing and said he would strongly respond to all procedures in Seoul. President Yoon Suk-yeol has approved the resignation. President Yoon volunteered to lead an after-school care program for first graders on Friday, endorsing the government's new initiative that aims to reduce the burden of childcare for working parents and guardians. According to Yoon's office, the president visited an elementary school in Gyeonggi-do province as a one-day instructor for a class of grade 1 students. He showed them a video of South Korea's Nuri rocket and read them books about space and how rockets work. The Nulbom School program was launched in time for the new school year in March, offering before and after school care during hours that overlap with work and the commute. Ranging from arts and crafts to self-development and physical activities, the sessions are currently available for first graders, but will expand to cover all grades from 1 to 6 by 2026. Capital Seoul's skyline has faded as suffocating yellow dust covers most of Korea today. Our An Sung-jin has more on this seasonal plight for people here in this part of the world.
The worst yellow dust so far this spring is covering South Korea. Starting from Thursday night, the peninsula has been blanketed by a severe yellow dust storm, which was carried by winds from Inner Mongolia.
Yellow dust storms can be seen in South Korea when three conditions are fulfilled. Yellow dust is created, moves over Korea and falls. This time, a downward current was formed in the air, making the particles fall.
The yellow dust storm is expected to move further south, affecting the air quality of most areas of the country. As of 5 p.m. Thursday, the Environment Ministry issued an attention yellow dust advisory for the capital area, Gangwon-do, Chungcheongnam-do, and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces. Fine dust alert levels have also been raised to very bad, which indicates that the average hourly concentration of fine dust particles smaller than 10 micrometers in diameter is more than 150 micrograms per cubic meter. The capital Seoul is seeing fine dust levels of 384 micrograms, in the city of Incheon peaked at nearly 500 micrograms. High concentrations of fine dust particles are expected across the rest of the peninsula throughout the day. Dirty rain caused by the dust storm is also expected across parts of the central and southern region, making an umbrella necessary. The Environment Minister emphasized the need for extra public caution and for people to limit their outdoor activities. Those with respiratory diseases, the elderly, and children are advised to stay indoors. Wearing a mask is recommended throughout the day. The yellow dust storm is expected to continue until Saturday. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
On the economic front, South Korea's overall industrial output rose in February for the fourth month in a row, led by greater chip production. Retail sales, however, lost ground. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin has the latest.
South Korea's overall industrial production and investment last month saw increases, while private spending dropped. Data from Statistics Korea on Friday shows that industrial output in February climbed 1.3% compared to the previous month. This marks the fourth consecutive rise. The agency mainly attributed the rise to a more than 3% on-month growth in production in the manufacturing industry, driven by a strong demand for semiconductors. More specifically, memory chips such as DRAM and flash memory chips saw a surge in production. Output in the service industry also contributed to last month's industrial output, inching up 0.7% on the back of greater demand for accommodation and restaurants. And facility investment was also up in the second month of the year, surging 10.3% compared to a month earlier. This is the largest growth seen in more than 9 years and a contrast from January's figures when facility investment fell on month. The agency said the growth was mostly due to the surge in investment of more than 20% in transport and 6% in the machinery sector.
The on-month rise of 10.3% in facility investment was due to investment increasing in areas such as ships and specialized industrial equipment.
But retail sales, a barometer for private spending and consumer demand, fell 3.1%, which is the steepest on-month fall since July last year. This comes as people spent less on both non-durable goods such as cosmetics and food and durable goods such as consumer electronics and home appliances. The official from Statistics Korea said that while the on-month figures were seasonally adjusted, it is likely that private spending may have been spread out between the first 2 months of the year, with Seolnar or the Lunar New Year falling early February this year. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The country's national tax revenue rose slightly for the first 2 months of the year compared to the same period in 2023. The Finance Ministry released data on Friday that showed revenue from January to February stood at some $40 billion. That's a rise of nearly $3 billion on year. The ministry attributed this mainly to an increase in corporate and value-added taxes. For February alone, year-on-year tax revenue rose for the second straight month. In other news, J-Hope, a member of BTS, has dropped a new album. Hope on the Street Vol.1 was released on Friday at 1 p.m. This comes despite J-Hope still completing his mandatory military service, from which he'll be discharged in October. The album, which was recorded before he began military service, has 6 tracks, including the lead track, Neuron, named after a dance crew he was part of before BTS. Through a handwritten letter, the rapper expressed hope for fans to get to have better understanding of him through his new album. His last album, Jack in the Box Hope Edition, was released in August last year, just 7 months ago. On the cultural front, the time to say goodbye to FuBao, the giant panda living in Korea's Everland amusement park, is approaching, as she's set to move to China next Wednesday. During her stay in Korea, FuBao has undeniably evolved into a cultural icon. Ahead of FuBao's second chapter in life, our culture correspondent Song Yu-jin delved into what's behind Korea's FuBao fever.
After 3 years and 8 months in Korea, FuBao, the beloved giant panda, will soon start a new chapter in China. The 3-year-old celebrity panda, the first offspring of Bao and Bao, is leaving her hometown Everland, Korea's largest theme park, on April 3rd. All cubs of pandas unleashed from China must return upon reaching sexual maturity, typically around 4 years old. FuBao's departure sparked a wave of emotion among her fans who flocked to say goodbye during her final days in public view. Some even waited for up to 7 hours. That's because FuBao has been at the center of Korea's panda fever.
Everland's YouTube channel, which uploads videos of FuBao, saw a surge of 450,000 new subscribers last year. Following the release of FuBao merchandise, the theme park recorded an operating profit of 66 billion won in 2023. I think a sensation is because FuBao is the first giant panda to be born in Korea.
Her bond with zookeepers, often called her grandpas, also played a big role.
FuBao's connection with the zookeepers is what resonated with people and made them like her even more.
Fans say her biggest charm is her personality.
FuBao is great at expressing her emotions. When she's angry, she might roll around. And when she's happy, she flashes this really joyful smile. So I sometimes wonder if there's a person inside her.
I think what I like to call FuBao's pure attitude towards life, such as her perseverance to eat bamboo or climb up a tree, somehow encourages and comforts people.
With FuBao's departure, there will be 4 giant pandas left in Korea. Parents Bao, Bao, and their twins Bao and FuBao. Everland is still packed with visitors waiting 1 to 2 hours just to catch a glimpse of the remaining 4 Bao family members. Those who are unable to bid farewell to FuBao in person can do so by looking at photos and writing messages. FuBao translates to a gift that brings happiness. For the past 3 years, she's brought great joy to Korea. Now, Korea wishes her a lifetime full of happiness. 송유진, Arirang News.
Today, yellow dust was rampant across the country and was the worst spring. There was dust rain mixed with yellow dust in inland areas as well. Fine dust warnings have been issued in the Seoul metropolitan area and are expanding to the southern parts of the country. Looking at the fine dust concentration this afternoon, they are up to 10 times higher than usual. The concentrations will decrease slightly overnight, but the remaining yellow dust is expected to continue to affect the country this weekend. Therefore, the fine dust concentration will remain at bad levels for the rest of the week. As yellow dust causes high concentration of fine dust, people with respiratory diseases should refrain from going out. Wearing a protective mask of KF80 or higher is necessary, and please wash your hands and hair as soon as you return home. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off at 4 degrees Celsius, Gwangju and Daegu 5 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 14 in Seoul and Chuncheon, Daejeon and Gwangju 19 degrees. A deeper spring energy with warm and cozy conditions will be seen this weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Hope everyone has a great weekend and a good night.